Hello, everyone. Dr. Michael O'Connor, a top expert in leadership management and performance, has just published a blog, How Organizations Can Survive This Crisis. Well, actually, any crisis for that matter. And I'm talking with him today to get a summary of his insights and advice. It's available at ocresults.com and on LinkedIn, and I'll give you those links later so you can get access to it. As a side note, we're both coming to you from our homes, practicing our social isolation and distancing during the crisis. We don't have access to our normal video facilities that either one of us might have, and this is unrehearsed because we want to get it to you right now as is to help you at this point in time. So here we go. Hello, Dr. O'Connor. How are you today?
Wonderful. Thank you very much for asking, Mike.
All right. Well, let's get right started into it. As I said, the details will be in the blog post, but let's get started with the first question. Dr. O'Connor, there's lots of information out there about what leaders and managers should be doing right now during this most recent crisis, and actually in any crisis. Why did you decide to add your advice at this time?
Well, Mike, originally I had hoped that the advice that was being provided to people by articles that I read and what I saw on the television and the internet would be helpful, but unfortunately found that was not the case. And so for the benefit of our clients and for others, I decided that I needed to put my own experience and thoughts and advice on paper, and did a blog that's free and more in-depth than this interview, of course, and provides a specific resource for anybody who would like to see that will, mention to them at the end. The problem with, mostly other written and video advice was that in some cases, although it was quite good, for instance, for like financial management actions that obviously are critical for those in the downturn mode in the crisis, which is the bulk, they're too narrow. And unfortunately, even worse in some cases, though, that they were flawed. So therefore, the blog and this supplemental video that highlights some of the key points in that blog as a resource for people.
All right, and since you published the blog, what's the significant difference or essence in it compared to the other advice out there?
Well, there are two mistakes we found that leaders and managers typically make. And the mistakes typically are about either what to do or how to do it. And so when we're talking about sustainability, that we're talking about what to survive is required, what to do. And mostly the leaders and managers, they don't. We react out of habits or what we've done in the past. And obviously, since the situation has changed, it requires a newer, different type of solution. And so that's the single most important thing, especially for a leader. Then the how-to is obviously those people executing the what's. And again, for them, many times that we find individuals are not aware, or they do it in ways that have unintended consequences. For instance, they solve one problem that creates one, two, or three others that they want to have. And primarily, it's because looking at it again from not that people are selfish, but out of fear and anxiety, they tend to get into either or type solutions, okay, for complex situations. And one or more of their key stakeholder groups end up suffering as a result of that when it doesn't need to be. It's got to add sustainability and to provide the satisfaction that's required for sustainability. Over time, all the stakeholders have to be treated fairly and be winning as they see it in terms of the reality of the situation. It's just can't just take care of the customers at the expense of the lives of the employees, or both of them at the expense of the owners, or all of them at the expense of others, their community, for instance. Okay, so that basically is that. And again, the blog is to really understand the what's and the hows. We can't address that in this video. There are key points from my 50 years of a study of other people and what they've learned, and having been through several crises of different types, mostly economic, of course, for business, but some that are perpetuated by other social crises, military crises, and now and health crises. That we know there are, again, solutions that work, and so again, we can provide a high level of insight and understanding of what to do from the video, but you really need to go to the blog. There you can read it, you can capture it, and then follow that kind of coaching advice that I've provided there.
Okay, and we'll include a link at the end of the video so people will have it directly and can get to it.
All right, that's great, thank you.
You've been a lifelong researcher and advisor for effective leadership and management. What is the most important personal attribute for leaders and managers for them to demonstrate to be effective as leaders and managers during the crisis?
Yeah, well, having been through these crises myself and with others, and reflecting on, what was it that was so, typically you do like the quote post-mortem. You want to see what did we discover here? What didn't work, but also what did work, so that we can build upon that and use it in similar situations that may not be crisis, but they're at least unfavorable. Because as we find that essentially what you learn in school, as an MBA or whatever, or a training about management and leadership, in unfavorable situations, people typically regress back to their own patterns, and they don't use that. And that's when we don't really need most of what we learn in favorable situations, because by definition, it means things are working fine. It's in unfavorable. And so the kind of resources we're talking about here and insights and actions are vital at this point in time. And the one that I have found is actually a combination of two attributes, and I call it ethical adaptability.
Okay, so, adaptability, you've always stated, is a vital quality in today's world. And you refer specifically that in a crisis, what's most important, as you just said, is ethical adaptability. So how is that different? And just briefly, because there's more detail in the blog, how can leaders and managers apply it in a crisis?
Okay, so it begins with, the most important is the first word, ethical. Mm-hmm. And typically when I type that, often I put ethical in caps and the adaptability in upper or lowercase, because adaptability by itself is neutral, ethically neutral. It can be done for the good of people, our business, the people that you serve, and yourself and others, or have the opposite effect. Okay, it works, but the question is it become a win for some and a lose for others? The intent of all of my work has been to help build and move towards an all-win world, all-win lives individually, with our relationships with others, as well as our teams, groups, organizations, country, the world. So to that end, the ethical part is the single most important component there. And that attribute is essentially based on our motivations. That is, you don't have to be capable to be ethical. There's no research whatsoever said individuals are more intelligent, okay, or more competent, are more ethical. Quite the reverse, actually, in some studies, because they think they're smarter than anybody else and so on. And also they tend to get get carried away with their ego. The basis for being ethical is both the intention as well as the actions that produce trust, well-being, and the betterment of people. And as I said, extend that all out, our groups, our organizations, our society, the world. One of the nice things of my 50 years traveling around the world, I've found that there are highly ethical people around the world, and they're in all levels of organizations, and I've found the same is true around the world, individuals who don't have that quality. Now, the second component of adaptability means that you actually do what is well-intentioned, we know, okay, based upon the ethical piece, but that it works in situations which are unfavorable, like a crisis, okay, where individuals have to be both willing and able to adapt effectively to the kind of solutions that the situation now requires that they may not prefer or typically be doing at this point in time. So you put the two together and we have individuals adapting for the good of themselves and other human beings rather than the opposite. I think a good example of that in terms of adaptability is that how we've seen previously some economic crises were perpetuated by individuals who are only doing things which was for their benefit, but at the expense of other parties.
So from an all-win perspective then, since that's key, what is the most vital question that fits the ethical adaptability requirements from a leader's and manager's point of view? What should they be asking?
Yeah, well, because it's most vital, it asks when we are faced with the most ultimate decision.
Mm-hmm.
What's more important, life or business?
Well, I would hope it would be life.
Well, yes, okay, it isn't for a lot of people. I've seen this tragically. Many people, they opt for business because, and many for not just self-interest, but they just feel that that's critical. But they lack the perspective to say that for us to have a not just successful, sustainable, but a fulfilling state. Okay, we know there are businesses, individuals and businesses, business ventures that have failed only to succeed again from that experience.
Right.
However, when one loses their life, they don't get that opportunity. And in fact, studies have shown that higher performers, people are highly respected in business and otherwise, on the average, they experience 5 times the number of setbacks or failures, if you wish, like not that they viewed it as a failure, but as a setback, as the average person. So that means that they are going to fail or have setbacks four more times than typically, at least, another individual on the average. Because what happens to other people, they basically give up. So each time that you suffer a setback in your business life, okay, the question is, what did you learn from that you can capitalize on to prevent or minimize the impact the next time? It's there, but most people don't do that. They don't think about it. They don't get it. So therefore, they make things much more difficult than it needs to be. And the other part is they don't reach out the resources that have those solutions.
So you've developed something that you titled the optimal business performance model. And you developed that over several decades as a resource for providing 4 general types of solutions that are required to both survive a crisis and optimize over time. So can you describe briefly the model and how can an organization apply this in a crisis to make sure it achieves results to not only be sustainable, but successful?
Sure. So all of this comes from a framework, because throughout my life, I've time and time again seen people and organizations faced with various dilemmas for which individuals say, well, you have to have training or you have to develop these skills and so on. We don't have the time. Many times we don't have the resources. We don't have the opportunity to do that in terms of the situation. We need an answer or solution now. Again, a lot of what I have focused on is what to do and how to do it, and providing specific guidance for people to do that. In terms of the model, basically what you're saying is that you're not going to have a sustainable and high-performing organization if you don't have all 4 solutions for a high-performing organization. And these solutions basically came from my work with organizations, my study of other business models, and some consistent with this, but too complex for people to understand and use. People can remember 4 things, okay, but they can't remember 13 or 7 or 8 very easily, and so on.
Right.
And
especially
so
during a crisis.
Yeah, it's got to be in your head, something, So like I go grocery shopping, if I have, you know, I do well with 4, but if you start to get up to like 7, I'm in trouble unless I write it down. Okay, partly because I'm not motivated to, and that's the same thing with people. They remember the things that are important to them, and they forget the other things that are important, not as important to them, but equally perhaps as vital to achieve the results. In this case, these 4 factors are interdependent, meaning each one affects the other. They're not independent. So you can't just apply one solution and say forget about the other 3. So when you're doing it, you have to see how it solves a problem related to that aspect of performance without causing a problem for the other type situation. So essentially, the 4 basic factors are, some are more immediate, okay, and others longer term, but they all exist anyways, whether it's been formalized or not. And the 4 are basically culture, people, processes, and strategy in that order. Back in 2006, I was going back and said, when did I first write that article? I read an article for well-known client, and basically for their leaders and managers about managing forward, not backwards. Okay, and so when we're dealing with a crisis, we're at risk to manage backwards because it was just groping for any solution. Okay, right. But it doesn't work unless it's systematic, and so it starts basically with, in terms of providing the kind of guidance there, it starts by answering a vital question for each of these 4. So if you answer those 4 questions, which we provide in the blog, okay, then you're going to be moving in the area of the direction of what to do and how to do it. And then for each of those 4 factors, performance factors for sustainability and optimal performance eventually, that I provide key information there, relative to what to do and how to do it. And so the first one is first solution is culture, your culture. Okay, it's the most important, but the least understood, as well as the least applied. Okay, a lot of people are, what is that? Well, a culture is essentially who you are and intend to be as an organization, not just in good times, but in difficult times. It's the character of the organization. And I've seen the character organization that's basically determined not by the owner or leader at the top, by people at different levels, across levels, at lower levels. And so the point is, if you look at what is it that's causing people to do business with us, want to do business with us as customers or partners and so on, often it's the people who are actually doing the work of your organization, not, for instance, sitting in meetings about that. And when they're not, that character, you pay a deep price for it. So culture is about character. Sure, competence comes into it, and that leads to the next factor, which is people. People are the primary root cause of higher versus lower performing organizations. It's determined by their demonstrated work capabilities, but especially by their sustained motivations that are so critical in highly unfavorable situations like a crisis. And I asked the question there again, and determine who are the people you must keep versus the people that you may have to lay off, for instance, because typically individuals get seduced by capabilities. We don't need all the A players. Woke up in the middle of the night last night again and thinking about the same thing. You put the performance levels that we use in our performance management system, scale it on an A to F. Okay, you need people that are C and above, okay, to survive. However, if you got a group of C people working together for the same results, you'll get better results than a group of A players all working on their own agendas.
Wow.
And I've seen that time and again. Now, obviously, I'm not trying to minimize talent in terms of capabilities, but I'm just saying it's overrated. We want both character and capabilities, and capabilities are not enough, especially in unfavorable situations, because people go through, get feared, anxiety, self-interest, all the negative qualities of human beings are more likely to be prevalent when things are going bad, not when they're going good. The next thing is your processes And so obviously people perform processes. Again, we talk about that. We did studies about people versus processes, what's more important. People typically think processes are more important. But look, here's the point. Okay, it's no longer business as usual in a crisis, right?
Right.
Okay, so when that's the case, whether you like it or not, and whether it's a downturn crisis, as is for most, or an upturn as we see for others, okay, because there's opportunity for some in a crisis, just not for most. In both cases, though, you have to focus on the solutions that customers are looking for that you have to provide now. Essentially, it's the people who are focused on taking care of the customers, not how smart they are or pushing the company's agenda, but who are the individuals that we have to take care of, and that it's critical and urgent to do that now. The idea here is, again, we've found time and time again that the best people in the world with the worst processes in the world will fix the worst processes, but the best processes in the world with the worst people, they'll sub-optimize performance all the time. Okay, so you know, and you don't, and again, it's critical and urgent in saying what processes are essential to provide the product or service that your customers must have right now. Okay, all other processes can wait till later. Eventually, that involves sometimes reinventing your whole organization after the crisis is over, saying, geez, no, I wonder why we were doing those things in the first place. Maybe we no longer need to do it, or there's a better way of doing it. That's that. And the fourth part, the fourth solution is your strategies. Now, when we're not in a crisis, you know, that's typically the first focus of the business. But the fact is, the crisis now, you have to understand that whatever strategy you had before is not going to work. Again, whether or not it's a growth strategy or a stability strategy, the two types. And the reason is, for those few that have the upturn for their business, then there's going to be either a magnitude of growth or opportunities, areas of growth they haven't even thought of that they have to capitalize on. And for most of us in the crisis, the growth strategy is not going to work at this time. We have to move back to stability. Stability always must precede growth. And in unfavorable situations, the focus is on stability. If more favorable, we move back towards growth. So typically, we're coping in a crisis situation based upon the change in the type of situations, the amount of situations, the impact of the conditions. And so the key there in terms of strategy is clarify again for everybody now that things have changed and what is our strategy now, communicate that to everybody, and collectively focus on this as our new agenda for survival so that we can continue to reap the benefits of that once this storm passes.
Is there anything else that you want to provide in summary form? Again, you said the details in the blog and they can get it there, but what about anything that you'd like to add in closing?
Well, yeah, just one perhaps. We've provided you with a proven framework and a roadmap for your business sustainability and fulfillment for your key stakeholder groups, including yourself. And by using that, you also now have a new opportunity for more effectively dealing with this crisis. And for others also that may follow in the future. This will not be your last crisis, I can assure you. Whether you like it or not, okay, the external conditions we cannot control, but we can influence it for our greater good. So it's up to you to take advantage of this opportunity, really, that we all have in a crisis, even though we don't wish crisis on anyone, by putting these insights and solutions provided in the video as well as our blog into immediate action, as well as any other wisdom you gain from other sources.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dr. O'Connor, for the summary and for the blog post. For the full details, including more action steps, you can get Dr. O'Connor's complete blog titled Crisis Leadership and Management that is Sustainable and Fulfilling at his website, www.ocresults.com. That's www.ocresults.com. It's free and no opt-in or email is required. For those of you who are on LinkedIn, Dr. O'Connor has also posted the blog there. So that's another resource source for you. We look forward to hearing back from any of you about this critical and urgent help and what needs you have going forward. Thank you again, Dr. O'Connor.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you to all the viewers.